Hi, Jackie Nunley, Director Industry Advisors for Travel and Hospitality at Salesforce. Thank you for joining me again. We've chatted a number of times before, but pleasure to have you here again to talk to us at PhocusWire. Welcome, first of all.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's good to be here again.
Okay, right. So since our last discussion, we've been talking off air a couple of times over the last 6 months or so, and we've come to similar conclusions, I think, that, sustainability is probably one of the most important issues affecting not only the world, but the industry that you and I operate in. And we thought there'd be a useful chance for us to kind of catch up on that and hear a little bit about yours and Salesforce's thoughts on that regard. So I thought, there are two elements to this, really, sustainability as an overall overarching trend, as it were. One is around what the customers are demanding around sustainability. And the other side, which marries quite nicely, is what do we as travel brands have to do to kind of push the services, work with B2B partners in order to kind of push this agenda either into the mainstream or be part of a strategy for a company. So first of all then, Jack, why do you think, first of all, this is the most important topic of the day, as it were?
Sure. So the hospitality sector really consumes about 5% of global water use. It emits 1% of global GHG emissions, and it accounts for 20% of the tourism industry's total carbon emissions. Mm-hmm. So on new customer demands, consumer awareness around the environmental impact of travel and tourism has really increased. And the sensitivities, to sustainable messaging, the travel products are really resonating with customers who want to travel with purpose. So I think it was last month I read a report that said, with everything that was happening personally and environmentally during the pandemic, consumers kind of experienced that direct link between the environment and their own well-being firsthand. Yeah. And that's made it an emotional issue. So it's resulted in them being hyper aware of the subject and really motivated to do something about it. So here in the US, I understand that it's about 30% of US consumers today who prioritize companies that are actively reducing their impact on the environment. And with the segments changing and the needs for travel, these highly empowered consumers are really seeking and championing, brands that commit to sustainability. Now, on the B2B side, the B2B interactions, around sustainability is not just based on personal ethical values. There are other limitations that kind of bleed into this. So understanding these different layers of interaction is really important, but especially when viewing the service ecosystem as an expansion of the service network. And that focuses on the interconnection between, commercial actors and their customers. So it's the lack of understanding of sustainability as a waste reduction framework in hospitality that's really missing the whole system of redesign potential of hospitality service models of the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jackie, that, the last 2 years has given many people and brands kind of pause for thought that, as well as there being a global pandemic taking place, there is another crisis kind of lurking, which has been, I think some might say, relatively ignored, whether it's by the industry or its consumers for a long time. But the pandemic has given people a lot of opportunity to consider their role and how they play an additional role in making the planet more sustainable. So we're going to dive into a couple of the elements that you talked about. So you would agree, therefore, I guess, that these brands, 30% you said in the US, they are perhaps now seeking consumers are now seeking brands to do the right thing and indeed show some leadership rather than follow perhaps the trends that are happening in the media. It's actually time for the industry to step up, right?
Right. So, a successful sustainability strategy has factors that, relate to organizational structure, culture, leadership, management control. I mean, the list goes on. There's employee motivation, qualifications, there's communication, But those that really want to lead in the future need to understand, in detail, all of the possibilities for action. And you need to understand it through a different lens. I think that training hotel staff and management on sustainability design is probably going to have a really powerful multiplying effect within these brands. And going from theory to practice to redesign their operations is going to require external expertise. So partnering with companies like Salesforce, can help redesign these operating models, these interactions, with travelers and with systems. And I think what we're doing for our customers is offering them solutions that we have already implemented ourselves. And it's a more effective way of reducing that negative impact caused by the operators while reinforcing that competitive advantage.
Yeah. So there are two outcomes here, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first one is that if you show leadership, you start using sustainable products, you start demonstrating in a sustainable way, it does have an ability to foster loyalty. The flip side of that, Jackie, is that you might actually lose customers that were previously loyal to you because you aren't showing the initiative, right?
Correct. So, consumers, but also employees want businesses to invest in making, sustainable improvements, not just comply with regulation. And they're prepared to reward or penalize, brands accordingly. So by the same token, businesses that are perceived by falling kind of short of these requirements that their consumers want, risk losing their customers, right? When post-pandemic recovery is really taking shape for, companies that are highly attuned to the high standards that consumers are holding them to. Yeah. So one of the questions, would be asking how they're helping their own organizations meet those demands. And in the most simple terms, take a look at supplier strategies, for instance. A customer, at a destination resort may want to know, is this meal that I've been served coming from 20 miles away or 200 miles away? Yeah. And as an indicator of the brand, whether the brand is serious about actually doing good. And it's not about the ingredients on the plate, Kevin. We're challenging brands to think about what's in their backyard. Are they thinking of how they can help, their franchises foster relationships with local suppliers, who are striving to do good and meet that need? On the other side of that coin, think about the advertising potential of a switch like that. Yeah. And getting into, that sort of information out to consumers as a customer acquisition strategy. I mean, you only have to benchmark keywords like farm to table to understand the potential of that move. Yeah. So, in summary, sustainability development really kind of, gives companies purpose. And climate change is really one of the greatest challenges humans have ever faced. And its effects, weigh really heavily on the world's most vulnerable communities. It amplifies, things like global inequality. And at Salesforce, we really consider the environment to be a key stakeholder. And we want our companies that we work with to be committed to kind of harnessing our culture of innovation to improve the world, to create that sustainable, low carbon future and economy. So playing an active role in moving that needle, whether it's on, diversity, on equity, on sustainability, it isn't just the right thing to do. It's also a significant business opportunity and a tenet of leadership in the future. So more innovative companies perform much better, and, leading the pack on sustainability can really create those lasting competitive advantages hospitality companies need.
Yeah, and there is an argument that it's always good to be on the right side of history, right?
True.
You don't want to be on the wrong side of history and be the airline or the hotel that was ignoring the signs and the messages that it was receiving from many angles. I wanted to ask you something that you mentioned about working with suppliers. Now, many hospitality brands will have had relationships with suppliers. Maybe they are local, maybe they aren't, for many, many years. And what we're arguing here is that they should actually fundamentally perhaps overhaul that supplier relationship. And that's actually quite a difficult thing to do and perhaps has cost attached, right?
Absolutely. So, sustainability has predominantly been a B2C thing. When we look at our industry, but B2B companies are embedded in a more complex kind of business network with multiple stakeholder groups. And I think that maybe it hasn't necessarily been a high priority for them, mainly due to the lack of awareness on how to respond.
Yeah.
I think that there's, a big room for improvement in this area in the B2B, travel world.
Yeah.
But when it comes to important elements, of course, there is a cost factor to be able to make it possible.
Yeah.
But you look at the important elements and you can hardly ignore them.
Yeah.
Training is at the top of the list. Without that, it's just temporary changes. Yeah. Next is the right analysis, in order to initiate those strategies based on data and achievable measurement to be able to prove that you're the right supplier, to these companies. And finally, sustainability in B2B companies has to be part of the wider business strategy and integrated into the DNA of the organization, not just environmental. So we're not just talking about, the difficulties with supply chain, but the social and economic elements that actually encourage businesses to want to do business with you. And right now, that's just not happening nearly enough. And we have to help these companies do better so that they can build models that benefit the B2C brands and strengthen those relationships with the stakeholders. And, I think that I've seen, important elements come into the B2B market. So it's not just they're not doing anything. I've actually seen something that is tied to sustainability. Mm-hmm. And that's where, we've seen increased investments in digitization across the travel journey. And it's partly driven by those concerns during the pandemic. But what we've seen is it's resulted in the travel experience going contactless and touchless, which provides greater energy efficiency directly tied to sustainability. Helping brands develop, that, or suppliers develop that digital first mindset and solutions that blur the online and the offline communications for a richer, more personalized, more sustainable travel experience. That is what is actually going to allow for the opportunities for these companies to promote their values, kind of publish their sustainability credentials and services in a more connected way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that speaks to the kind of the labeling and the positioning of all this, demonstrating to both your suppliers and your customers. I think we've kind of touched on that about what you are doing. I think, to kind of finish this off then, if you can, Jackie, I mean, it's great, a wise head like yourself, a half knowledgeable journalist sitting here for 15 minutes talking about all this. Are you optimistic that this discussion is threading through to the industry and they will take action? In other words, how do you sense this is all going to shake out? Yes, the industry is in recovery mode, and depending on whether you're an airline, it's for at least another 18 months. If it's a hotel, it might be for the rest of this year, depending on who you ask. But there are lots of things that brands are trying to consider. So again, are you optimistic, or do you think it's a lot more nuanced than that? Some will take different steps here and there. Some will, listen to people like you and hopefully make some right decisions.
I'm incredibly optimistic. I think this is exciting. Anything that, kind of starts to build what we're going to have in the future, for me, just excites me. And I think that it's a great opportunity for us to see, another shift in which brands are leading in the space. Hospitality has been overwhelmingly focused on growth-centric strategies or business models. And they've paid little attention to the impact of their activity on destinations, and those with social carrying capacity. So it's increasingly obvious to end consumers, like you know, you and I, even though we are in the industry, that the hospitality or tourism's industry's growth-centric model is unsustainable.
Yeah.
That in itself makes it so exciting to see what these brands are going to do to actually address the weight of the industry and evaluate what they're doing in these, you know, kind of like spaces where there's environmental impact. And not only that, what makes me really excited is loyalty. This is a shift in loyalty.
Yeah.
You know, for customers to become loyal, they really have to like you. And this is a great space that we've actually reached within our industry. So, like any long term relationship, you know, it really helps if you have shared values. Customers are going to return to your brand, you know, for the product's quality, but sustainable practices are becoming a close second. So, as more of these brands kind of wake up to the emotional call of sustainability, you know, greenwashing is not going to work anymore. We can't give false impressions of environmental positivity. And, you know, that requires new innovation. Get excited about reaching these customers. Brand advocates are going to be like big proponents of customer loyalty. Think about the way we're seeing companies, you know, points programs shift from, you know, what they were, just earn and burn, to aligning with loyalty for good.
Yeah.
You know, when was the last time you could use your points to donate to charities? And, you know, especially now, right now, with what's happening in the world, that's a great way to be able to, you know, acquire customers, loyal customers, but also nurture your own. You know, think about all the companies who are considering, you know, or partnering. There is proof out there that they're partnering with digital wallets as we move into a new era of payment options for loyalty. I think it's incredibly exciting.
Yep.
You know, if these customers start matching solutions that are their customers' focus, I really think that this is, you know, the next area. And that requires the right technology and capabilities that provide you with that flexibility and the structure that surrounds the capabilities of our hotel customers, that allows them to be the easiest company to do business with, whether it's for their partners, for their suppliers, for their customers. This is the way that builds on that connection.
It's always refreshing to talk to someone in a nice way, in an intelligent way, who's half full rather than half empty about
Always.
a problem that we all face. So Jackie Nunley from Salesforce, a pleasure to talk to you always. Thanks ever so much for talking to me. Thanks ever so much for everybody for listening. Cheerio.
Thank you so much, Kevin.